Hey folks, Matt Sharp here with another Pacific Angler Friday Fishing Report. This is where we go over a framework of fishing in Vancouver. We touch a little bit on current events, we touch a little bit on politics, and obviously we go over the fishing. This week, the big news is that we were expecting biblical level storms, massive amounts of water, and we expected all the fisheries to be blown out. But as I'm doing this video at least, the forecasts have been downgraded a bit. There's a little less water coming, and there might be some opportunities out there for you guys to go fishing. We're gonna look at the Squamish. It's not as good on the Squamish. The water's still quite high out there. We expect things to be challenging. We're going to look at the Vetter, which is interesting because it hasn't gone out yet as I'm writing this report. So we're going to look at the water levels, we're going to look at the weather and see what we can predict over the next couple days. We're also going to look at the Harrison. Now, there's been some poor fishing reports over the last little bit on the Harrison, which is too bad on the Chum front, and the water is quite high there. So we'll look at those water levels and give you what to expect over the next week. We're also going to talk about another video that we did. We did a twitching jig video last week, and it was on a jig called the Nightmare Jig. Zach did it, and it's really cool because he looks at a very basic pattern, meaning it's a great template for any style of twitching jig you might want to do, but he's got some really cool tweaks that you can add to your own jig patterns that will really help you move forward. Lastly, I am going to touch base on some fish science stuff. This is one that I have fun with. I touch base with my buddy up in the Vetter Chilliwack hatchery, and we vet scientific journals and see if we can find some useful fishing information. And I've got some fun stuff for us this week, so you'll want to stay tuned to the end of the report for that. As always, if you guys are watching this video and you look down at the date in the date header and the title below, and it's nowhere near the date that you're watching the video, take a look up here. This is our channel where we have all our Friday fishing reports. We do this every Friday, so we've probably got one more up to date for you. And as always, if you want to see more videos like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button, hit that like button, and let's get into the report. So here we are. I am filming on Thursday night, just to be a full disclosure, so you guys know that the weather reports do update and they might be a little bit more up to date when you guys are watching that. So always check them out if you're going out. But as it stands now, it looks like we're going to get rain. We joke a little bit about me being a weatherman here, so I'll let the professionals take this one over.
And now here's Ollie Williams with the Blackie weather forecast. Ollie?
It's gonna rain!
Thanks, Ollie.
Well, that's actually not the whole story. But before I get into that, I had something else wonderful left on my desk this week. Sometimes it's beer, sometimes it's mezcal, sometimes it's tequila. This week I have a beautiful piece of sort of fly fishing pottery. I'm going to be drinking water out of it. It might turn into scotch by the end of this report, but Selena Sked dropped these off for me, and they're beautiful. She works out of Bella Coola. A lot of you guys that go up to the Dean might have visited her there. She also works up on the Dean, but she makes these beautiful sort of fly fishing related pottery pieces. I'm not sure if we're going to carry them in the store, but they are really cool. I'm going to link them down in the description below. Again, we don't make any money on that link. We just wanted to support someone doing something cool. So check that out. And now the weather. So obviously we're going to get a ton. And looking at the Vancouver report as it's updated right now, again, that's Thursday night, we're going to be looking at 20 to 25 millimeters, which is a massive dump. This was supposed to be like 30 to 40 when we looked at it last Monday, so it's been downgraded quite substantially. And then Saturday we've got 5, Sunday we've got 10 to 15, and then 15 on Monday and 10 on Tuesday. Now that overall, that's a substantial amount of water, and everything in the area is going to rise, but it might not be as dramatic as we expected. So not as bad, definitely worth looking at. Look at the Capilano. Look at them if they pop that dam open and then close it again. There might be some cool fishing opportunities there. And more importantly, let's look up at Squamish. Now, Squamish is very similar, so it's 25 on Friday. That's not good. I expect that to put the river out. It'll be a lot dirtier than it is now, which is also not good. It's a little bit colored right now as we write this. And then Saturday 1 to 3, and then Sunday 15. So again, it's not going to be that like in the trees gone blowout, but it will be very high. So take that into consideration. You're going to have challenging fishing, but again, it probably won't be unsafe. I say that with, a lot of reservation. I want you to always check. because these things update quick. Literally, if we looked at this, 6 or 7 hours ago, it would have said this being like 35 to 40 and then carrying right through the weekend. So good news with some bad news mixed in there. Throw it out to Chilliwack, and they're looking at a very similar report. As always, it just updated on there. Bear with. 25 mils Friday, 15 and 10. I was looking at the highway cam, and this is a useful trick. There's a highway cam or a road cam, that you can look at right at Vedder Crossing, and you can pull that up to see the river. It hits the bridge, but it also sees a good chunk of the river, and so you can Google search that. It's just I think it's BC road cams Vedder Crossing, and you can get a gauge. And as of today, filming this, I'm going to put the picture up here because I screenshotted it before it got dark. It looked pretty low. It looked pretty clear. So that means the river can take some water. So you could have some okay fishing if you're out Friday, and it's definitely worth looking at over the weekend, even though we do expect water to be quite high. So let's look at water levels as they stand right now, because this is what you guys want to be keeping your eye on. Because as always, when we get a storm like this, it moves fresh fish in, it moves fish around, and they can go on the bite if you can time it right, if it doesn't get too dirty. And so looking at the real-time hydrometric water levels, here you are on that site. We go over that every week. I'll take a peek at Squamish first. And you can see right now she's out. She's at like a 4 meter, but she's dropping and now sort of levering at a 3.5. Now that's fishable, but not good fishable, meaning you're gonna have to grind out a fish or two. Fish close to the bank, the fish moves in tight to the bank in water conditions like that, but she's not unsafe. If we watch that and she's going through the roof again, obviously we got problems. As you wake up on Friday, if you're thinking about going out, pop this up and check it. Just for the sake of argument, I will pull up that upper graph, the one at the Ilaho, and we'll view that one. Let's see what we've got here. And you can see, she went up, she came down, and she's going back up right now. So I would guess tomorrow, and I would guess Saturday, are going to be quite blown out on the Squamish. Throw that over to what's this? That's Brackenell at Squamish again. Let's throw it over to the Vedder. And you can see this spike here, but 1.95, that's not too high. That's still fishable. And like I said, when we look at that cam on the road, it looked pretty clear today. The boys have been out fishing over the last couple of days, and the fishing's been excellent. Alex got a donkey of a Chinook on a trout-sized rod. It wasn't what he was intending to catch, but that's a cool picture. I'll link that up, or I'll put that up here in the report. And he's got a bunch more details on the Vedder of what he's going to expect coming down the pipes. And again, keep your eyes on it. It's not going back up right now. We'll see what that 25 mils does tomorrow. Now, on the fishing side, so how does that all affect the fishing? Well, the biggest thing you're going to find is when things get dirty, which they are going to be this weekend, and when they get high, fish will move in tight to shore. So in some areas, it can actually make the fish better to a certain extent. But you want to up your presentation colors. So we want to go with bright colors, big presentations. So that means larger chunks of roe if you're fishing the Vedder and you're fishing for coho. That means larger Colorado blades if you're on either the Squamish system or the Vedder system, and or much larger spoons. The other one is twitching jigs, and we're going to talk about them in detail because twitching jigs are excellent when you can get milky water, because you can throw really big ones with crazy colors on them, and they tend to stand out and do really well. Now, the other one I wanted to talk about was the Harrison. I've got a picture here of the Harrison. Andre's been out scouting that because he's got some guiding coming up. And she's really high, and the numbers aren't all that good as we write this report. But I've got some good news. I'm going to talk about that in the science piece. We're going to look at the Albion test fishery and look at some numbers there. But overall, right now, the Harrison is very high and hard to walk around on. So it's hard to access. And then also when it's really high, that spreads the fish out quite a bit. And sometimes you just can't get to them because the water's too high. He's going to be out this weekend if the weather holds up, or holds through, next weekend, and we'll get a lot more details when he does that. But overall, right now, she's quite high. She's quite a challenge. And the reports we've been getting are okay. Guys who can get out in boats, can motor around. They're finding the odd chum. They're finding few coho, but it hasn't been anything to write home about. So with the dirty water in mind, we obviously talked about some of the lures you can use, and as always, check out the blog report. We've got a lot more details on what gear you might consider in these conditions. But I talked about twitching jigs, and this is one that's sort of taken the Pacific Northwest by storm. There's lots of guys out there twitching for coho, for chum, for chinook, and it's extremely effective. It's something if you'd gone back maybe even 5 years, you wouldn't even seen in a tackle shop. A few guys were doing it. I remember the first guys doing it, sort of some old timers, very experienced anglers with a smile on their face. They'd go in and clean out a coho pool when no one else was catching anything. But they were using twitching jigs, and this has developed quite a bit in the last 3 years. To the point where they're very common fare to be seen out on the Vedder River, to be seen out on the Squamish River, as well as many of the other ones in between. And with a little bit of Halloween sort of lead up or Halloween theme to it, Zach did a video on the Nightmare jig. The Nightmare color combination is a black and red color combination. It's used in a bunch of different lures. But he did a jig variation on it. It's a great color for coho. It's a great color for chinook. It's also a great color for steelhead if you find areas where you can twitch for them maybe in the next season to come. But what I wanted to take away from this video is he has some really cool tweaks, things that are, I mean, I won't say different, but ways to handle the material. This design is a fairly simplistic design, a fairly common design, but if you guys are getting into tying your own jigs, you'll definitely want to check this video out because you can make a bunch of them relatively easy, and more importantly, you can customize them with the colors you want, and that's really the fun part. So guys, we made it to the end of the report. Thanks for sticking with me, and as promised, I'm going to go over some science stuff, some fish science stuff. We've been getting a bunch of comments, a bunch of support on that, a bunch of emails about that. Some of you guys don't like it, and that's you. I won't hold it against you. You can tune out right now. I have a friend, a guy I went to high school with, who works at the Vedder Chilliwack hatchery. Now, he wants to remain anonymous, but he's been helping me a bunch. He dropped by last week and put a stack of scientific journals and studies on my desk. Reading them is kind of like watching paint dry, I am not going to lie, but if you can get through it, if you can get through the boredom of flipping through the hundreds of pages of sort of cryptic information, there's some really cool gems.
I'm supposed to start with these operation programs first. That's Major Buck. Let's do something a little more fun.
That's kind of what I'm going to do today. Is we've been going through that and sort of going through the boring stuff, getting rid of it to try to find tidbits of valuable information that us as anglers should find interesting. First of all, because it's the sport and the fish that we love, but also that we might be able to apply on sort of a very general 1,000-foot level to our fishing. So we had a question about how fast fish move, and that was the goal of me getting all this information. And I'm not gonna lie, I have not got to the bottom of that. I am going to do a video on that in the future that's much more detailed. But like I said, going through hundreds of pages of reports is what it's going to take to sort of make some assumptions there. So bear with me on that. But we did find some sort of generalizations. The data to get a sort of a flaming sword number where it's like coho move at 2.4 kilometers an hour doesn't really exist. The scientists really don't have that data. But they do have a lot of other studies that we can make some assumptions off of them. So I'm going to share some of those assumptions that we sort of gathered from that this week. And then do look out, I am going to try to come up with a much more detailed how fast fish move video in the future to come. But the first one was coho, and we're not going to be able to have an exact speed for them. And one of the biggest reasons for that is when they catch a fish, they can't determine if after they caught it and they released it that it just stalled out and sat there for 3 days because it was stunned from the catch and release deal. That said, they do have some data sets on how they move and some generalizations there. And the big takeaway from coho is that they move very, very quickly, but then they stop for very long periods of time. And we can vet that in our fishing. You see that all the time where coho will move up, all of a sudden they'll show up in a pool, and then they might be in that pool for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and then all of a sudden they're gone. It's how we fish for them. We fish them in those big tanky pools, because that's where those fish are holding when they're doing that long layover period. So it sort of confirms how we're fishing for coho in the way that they move. Now the next one we looked at was Chinook. There is more data on Chinook. Anytime there's a big commercial fishery or a big First Nations fishery, there's a lot more scientific data on it. And the big takeaway from how Chinook move is they move extremely consistently and fast, meaning that when the water goes high, it doesn't matter, they keep moving. When the water is low and they want to move, they keep moving. So they're not as hindered by the natural changes, or barriers you might call them, of the weather conditions or the river conditions, and they just keep plowing. Now the other one that was interesting were the pinks, and the pinks don't have a lot of data on them. There's a lot of general stuff on them, but not a lot of movement data up until about this last year, and it became much more important in the last 2 seasons because first of all the numbers were a little bit lower than expected. Well, I guess in the last 3 seasons because they're every 2 years here, but the numbers were low, and that was a concern. And then we also had the slide, which was also a major concern for them. So the scientists looked at them in a lot more detail in the last 2 years, and there's a lot more information out there. And the funny thing was they're the most consistent movers. Nothing stops them. They just keep going. And they go until they get to where they're going to spawn, and then they spawn and die. And so it was interesting to hear information about how they got over the barrier. They were actually the first species to get over the barrier. Go figure, you think it would be a Chinook, you think it might even be a coho or maybe a sockeye, but no, it was the pinks that scooted over that barrier first, which was interesting data. But long story short, they move very consistently. They keep moving until they get to where they're going to spawn, and then they stop. Now the last one, and this one's important for you guys, this one's valuable right now, is the chum, too many species. The chum, and the reason it's important is right now we are quite concerned about the number of chum coming back. There is rumors that they might shut down chum fishing across the Vedder and the Stave area. And what the guys do is they look at the Albion test fisheries, and there's some data from this. If you guys don't know what the Albion test fishery is, it's something that's been happening for many years. When I say 70 years, there's data on it in here. But you can Google search it and get the numbers. And they do it at the Albion Ferry Crossing. The old Albion Ferry Crossing is roughly where they do it. So that's just down, I believe, from the Mission Bridge. And let me just pull it up for you guys. Where is she here? Oh shoot, I've pulled that off. Bear with me, I'll get it in 2 seconds. Test fishery, here we are, Albion. So they break down, let's wait for the sirens outside, someone's getting arrested. So the Albion test fishery, they can break down all the different species. There's some caveats with this, and if you want to really look at these numbers, you need to read about the size of panel of net that they use, how they're doing those sets, because you will see, for example, smaller fish usually don't get caught as easily in this test fishery right now, but the chum do get caught quite a bit. And you can see the numbers here, they're much lower than seasonal norms right now. You can see back in early October, we were sort of like 10 fish a day, 15 fish a day, 8 fish a day getting caught in that test set. And then if you look now, we're starting to see a few more fish. We've got 23, 15, 28, 31. That's not good news. Those numbers should be quite a lot higher than that right now. But he says from these numbers, they know that it takes about 2 days for them to get to the Vedder Canal. So that's interesting for you guys. Right now we're looking at the first, sizable wave of chum coming through. That was on the 16th. So we can say that today when you guys are watching this report, the 18th, 19th, and 20th, we should see a noticeable wave of chum arriving on the Vedder. And that also applies, he says, to the Harrison, meaning they're roughly the similar distance. You guys can get out your protractors. It's not the exact same distance, but it's roughly in the same realm. So 2 days we should start seeing some chum show up in the Harrison, which would be good because as it stands right now, the chum reports have been really poor and really low. That said, these numbers are not where they should be, so do keep your eyes peeled for any fisheries changes on that front. But again, some interesting fishing science that we can apply to our fishing coming down the pipes over the next week. Now the last piece, and this was actually the most interesting for me, it may actually not be useful for fishing, but it was something that I was wrong on. Now for years when people ask me when do fish move? Well, we know that they move a lot at one period of time during the day, and I always thought that was during the night. But from the data that we were looking at, it is not. They don't actually move sort of between the 8 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night range till the about 3 in the morning. They're very slow in there, and that makes sense. It's dark, there's not a lot for them to move on. But where they move the most on a general scale, on the Vetter at least, because this is where the data came from, was they move between 4:30 in the morning and 8 o'clock in the morning. So I thought that was interesting. I hope you guys like some of those tidbits. I know they're fairly general, and I plan to get them a little bit more detailed, have a little bit more numbers behind them. But that wraps up what I've got for you guys today. I hope you guys liked the report. I hope you guys leave any comments or add anything down there that you'd like to see in future videos. And as always, make sure you check out that blog for a lot more details on all the fisheries. I have that linked in the description below. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll catch you in the next report.